I just tell people like, look at it, take the word AI out of it and take it as if you hired like a new hire on your team. There were certain tasks that like the person you just hired is not like when Ray hires a new analyst, they don't get to do the big scary incident on day 3. There are certain things Ray has to see before that analyst gets to do those things. And when they do get to do them, I would assume, Ray, you're watching certain things to make sure they're doing them to like the way Expel wants them to do, and then you give them feedback afterwards. It's like the exact same thing, just instead of talking to a human, you're going to be evaluating an agent to do it.
Nerdy 30.
What's up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Nerdy 30. Today, we're talking about where AI actually belongs in your SOC, and just as importantly, where humans should remain. I am your host, Ben Baker, Director of Content here at Expel, and this is our 8th episode in the series. Our previous episode, actually, was on Claude Mythos with our friends Marcus Hutchins, James Shank, and our Chief Technology Officer, Greg Notch. If you missed that, it is well worth your time. So I would encourage you to go to our YouTube channel. That is youtube.com/@Expel and go subscribe. Go subscribe to it. Go check that out. We've also got Nerdy 30 episodes on AI-generated malware hype, the state of the MDR market, how to measure your SOC, even how to study for cybersecurity certifications with my friend Rusty Newton. That was episode 1, and it's awesome. So recommend checking that out. Again, you can check out all those on our YouTube channel. And while you're at it, you should go ahead and subscribe to our LinkedIn channel. Follow us on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/company/expel, because that's where you'll hear about upcoming Nerdy 30s for the rest of the year. We're doing these every 3 or 4 weeks. A lot of them coming even this summer. I was thinking about topics for this summer, including a possible behind-the-scenes session on how we went about building AI within our platform. So recommend following us on LinkedIn, and you can keep up with us in that regard. All right, before I tee up the topic and intro our guests, let me first address the format. If you've seen the show, you know what I'm about to say, but it's worth saying again. This is called the Nerdy 30. That would be 30 minutes on nerdy topics. After I intro our guests, I'm going to put a timer on the screen counting down from 30 minutes. At the end of 30 minutes, an alarm will go off, and at that point, the discussion will be over. Feel free to drop in questions or comments during the session, though we may hold them till the end. Usually what we'll do is we'll choose a couple, and then if there are more than we can get to, we'll address the rest in a blog or something like that. Blog, by the way, check out our blog at expel.com/blog. If you go to expel.com/blog, you will actually see an option to subscribe to our blog. Recommend doing that. We won't spam you. We literally will send you one email a week that's a roll-up of all the blogs we publish that week. We usually do 1 to 3 blogs published every week. Really great stuff. Highly recommend checking that out. And again, we're not putting you into a marketing email. This is purely for your information and for your education through the work that we're doing on the blog. Recommend checking that out. All right. As I mentioned today, we're talking about where AI actually belongs in the SOC. Unless you've been living under a rock, everybody's talking about AI, and specifically in security, AI's place, right? Is it going to replace the security analyst? We think that's the wrong question to ask. The better one, and the one we're going to spend the next 30 minutes on, is where does AI actually belong in your SOC, and where do humans need to remain? A month ago, our team published a white paper called Trust versus Impact, which is a framework for thinking through exactly that question. And the TLDR here is, we recommend in that white paper mapping any SOC workflow or task against 2 variables. 1, how bad is it if that thing goes wrong? And 2, how much do you trust the system to get it right? And where those 2 lines meet tells you whether to automate it, keep humans around, or stay out of it entirely. So we've also built an interactive tool that walks through the framework using your own workflows. You can find both the white paper and the tool at expel.com/trust. That link will take you to the white paper, and in the sidebar, you'll see a link to the interactive tool. I'm going to show you the tool here if I can. There we go. If you can see that. So this is actually the tool where you can take your own tasks and plot them against our trust versus impact framework. And so you will be guided through answering some questions that ask what the impact is, what the trust is, how much you trust the AI system to complete this task. As you answer those, you can see them plotted live on this matrix. And then what you can do is you can actually click share the assessment. It'll give you a unique URL, and you can send that to anyone. And it'll send them an example of that grid with all of your tasks plotted on that. And you can start a conversation from there. So pretty awesome resource we have. I helped make it, so I'm a little biased, but I do think it's useful. So you should check that out. Again, expel.com/trust. All right. So today, to introduce, we've got two folks here who are going to talk through what this looks like in practice. One of them actually built the framework, and the other one actually lives it day to day in our SOC. So let me introduce them in one by one. First, I'm going to introduce in Nick Hatcher. What's up, Nick? How are you?
I'm just laughing at your little intro here as I helped make the tool. I was like, Ben Baker, the web app developer over here.
I'm not a web app developer. I know how to use the tools at our disposal. That's all that I will say. So Nick, one of the primary authors of this framework, Nick is currently a senior product manager here at Expel, working on platform and AI features as well as integrations. Nick has been with Expel for a little over a year. And before coming to Expel, he spent almost 6 years at Rapid7 building their MDR service, where he wore many hats. He's a hat wearer, ranging from incident response, consulting, project management, to managing product and program operations teams. Nick, thanks for joining us, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's going to be good. And then next up, I want to invite in Ray Pugh, who is an alumni of the Nerdy 30. I think this is your third. Chill out, bro. All right. You just need to chill out. Just kidding. I'm glad you're back with us. Ray is currently Senior Director of SOC Operations here at Expel, which covers our always on 24/7 operations. He's been with Expel for about 8 years, which is awesome. During that time, he's been with us in various operational roles for our MDR, phishing, threat hunting teams. Threat hunting services team. So, Ray, welcome back.
Thank you. I wasn't sure if you were going to invite me back after last time, so this was special. Whenever I got the invite,
listen, the last time, we threw chairs, and it got a little crazy, but that's not true. But maybe it is. Episode 2, go check it out, people. There we go. All right, Nick. First question to you, as sort of the author of this framework, and this is what we're sort of anchoring this discussion on today. Walk us through the trust versus impact framework. What are the two axes? Why those two variables? And how should a SOC leader actually use it?
I think you did a pretty good job in the intro of explaining the two axes: trust, impact. How much do you trust the machine to get it right? How bad would it be if it got it wrong? And we went with those two more because there's already a lot of, I guess, hoopla going around about this topic. So we just wanted to anchor it in something that was really simple. And I think it naturally also, if you do it with your team as a security leader, you might not even be able to get a point on that graph, because you might have a passionate discussion, let's call it, of where you all think it is. And that's valuable in and of itself too. So we anchored it in those two so that it could actually result in something that teams could use. And it makes it really simple. It makes a really visual layer. And I think it also helps teams get to a point where they're not just saying no to things. They're saying either not right now or absolutely yes, we'll let it go there. And they can start having the conversation about, if they find something in that quadrant that it's AI doesn't go anywhere near this, you're naturally then going to have the conversation of well, why do you guys think that? And what would it take for you to trust it more, or to lower the amount of impact it would have if it goes wrong? So that when you go back to other teams internally, or maybe to vendors or whatever, you can say, it's got to be this tall to ride the ride. And you're no longer the team of no, I don't want AI, because I really don't think you can be that anymore. That was maybe last year's argument. But this year, if you're drawing that hard line in the sand, it's going to be a tough go for you internally, or just in general. I think not just in cyber, just tech in general, you're going to be hard pressed to not adopt in some way.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day with this, we want it to be a conversation starter, more than anything. Again, that's why I think being able to share it, plotting these out as a group, as a team, and then being able to share this out and sort of use that as a place to kind of start that conversation. To your point, it's becoming, you don't want to be the department of no, right? And I think in security, a lot of times, there's that perception. It's we're going to take this security team and they're going to, shoot it down or whatever. So that's what we're trying to avoid inside of the framework. Where did the framework come from? Were you inspired by something whenever you first started riffing, when you came up with this? Kind of walk us through the process of how this came to be.
I'd love for it to be some amazing epiphany moment, or a funny story, I was in the shower one day and thought of it. But it was more I think I just refuse to start that awkward 5 minutes of a Zoom meeting when you're waiting for everyone to get on. I really try not to ask about the weather. And I have the privilege of talking to a lot of customers by the nature of what I do at Expel. And it was starting to get kind of crazy at first. Like, I feel like a year ago, I had a lot of people that I'd say, "Oh, you coming from a meeting? Like, how's your day going?" Like, "Oh, where they were talking about like how, no, we're not going to implement AI." And then there was just this like very sudden shift that a lot of people stopped saying that. And they were saying like, "Oh, we were coming from this meeting where we're figuring out like where or how, but like we're not sure where we can put things." And then it was just a matter of like, well, there's got to be something that we can anchor it around. And having a background in like consulting project management, I just thought like, well, back in the day, the IR team I was a part of, we did tabletop exercises for people. We did like simulated breach things. Like, how would we have done it? And I think this is pretty close to how we would have done it. We would have just like sat there and helped people have a conversation.
Yeah, when I this is not in the we didn't plan on this question, but I'm going to ask it anyways, and it's coming to you, Ray, so get ready. When I think about this framework, it's all about AI intentionality, like being intentional about where you're using AI. And I feel like the tendency these days is to just shove AI at the problem, rather than like thinking critically about, does AI belong here? Like, does it really belong here, or could it belong here eventually, but maybe it doesn't today? Like, it's sitting down and rather than just shoehorning AI into every problem, it's thinking critically and intentionally about that. Like, from your experience, Ray, in the SOC, our SOC's been using AI and automation since the jump. Like, why is it so critical and important to think critically about where AI fits in SOC workflows?
I think it's immensely important because, I mean, it understandably fits into the framework that Nick built. And then, Ben Baker, master developer, built this really nifty tool.
Okay.
But I think it is really important to be intentional about it because, like, trying to think about it in a practical sense, like I use AI, my personal life as well as my professional job duties, which I work in the SOC, but I'm not hands-on in the queue responding to incidents anymore. That was my first few years here at Expel. But there's, just as with like my professional role as well as my personal life, there's certain untouchable areas where I wouldn't trust AI, like to parent my children. That seems like a weird spot, like as an example. So I think being intentional, as well as like as operators and folks in the SOC, we have a risk aversion and a skepticism that makes us interrogate things very closely, but it almost feels backwards to try to jam it into everything, like focusing on any problem that we're trying to solve is, well, what's the outcome that we're trying to achieve and how important is that outcome? Is there variety in the ways that we can achieve that outcome? There's always a trade space of, the buckets of people, process, and technology. How can we fine tune those things to find the right mix? Also considering our constraints, restraints, things that we would like to do that we can't do right now, which gets back to something Nick was saying earlier. So overall, I think that intention is really important, but focusing on what you're trying to solve and working your way backward, to me, feels like the right order.
Yeah, focusing on the end goal, and then knowing AI is a tool in the toolbox, right, to be used. So, Nick, a lot of frameworks like this end up being about what not to automate. And again, we kind of just alluded at some of that stuff, but it really feels like this is all about pointing AI at the right hard problems. Again, this whole idea of AI intentional, like, what's the difference between those two things? And why does it matter?
Yeah, I mean, I think going back to something we said earlier, like if we developed a framework that helped you rule things out, I think you're going to get some funny looks from people inside of your business of like, really still? So it does rule things out. Like it helps you put maybe some things up on the shelf of like maybe later, but I think it will, most people are surprised how much stuff it does say like, oh, maybe it is an opportunity. Or like, I think the quadrant that I find the most interesting is the one where if something ends up here, you shouldn't have humans or AI doing it. Like it's just fundamentally broken. And you're either burning out a human or you're going to have AI just go rampant and maybe make some really bad decisions because either the data isn't there or things like that. It's not so binary. And I think it helps people figure out where all these tasks are. And it's an interesting problem because like I just came off a call with another customer who's asking me about it. And it's one of the first problems that I've seen in security where like the example I used with them was data residency, where like there's not really a lot of room to play there. Like CISOs can talk to each other and there are rules and things like that. But this is one of those things that I guarantee if we could take everyone's quadrant that's done this, none of them are going to look the same. So other customers can't really help each other because they're, even people like in the same vertical, same industry, same size, it's going to be different. So if you just make a framework about, well, don't automate this, the problem itself is too bespoke to be that binary.
Yeah, I think that goes back to that's sort of the crux of the framework as well, right? Like nobody's use case is the same. Like nobody's experience is the same. And so throwing a tool at, somebody's environment and saying, hey, AI, go do the magic stuff. It's like, there's context, everybody's got a different context in the way that they're working. And it just doesn't really work that way. Everybody's a little bespoke. So let's kind of get into, maybe how AI, appears in the SOC, maybe throwing around some examples here at Expel as well. In all of our prep calls with the three of us, both you, Nick, and you, Ray, have pointed to identity alerts here at Expel and as a cool use case for how AI comes to be. Ray, walk us through what that looks like in the SOC. What does the AI do? What does it not do? What had to be true before you trusted it to run?
This is an interesting use case because just a higher level framing, identity alerts traditionally can be very ambiguous because there's certain other surfaces it can be very decisive, like, oh, that file is bad, that is malware, everything it touches is bad. Whereas identity, it's baselining both user behavior, what's normal in that environment, what have we seen in other customer environments, is a fairly time intensive endeavor, which analysts have gotten very good at doing that manually. It plainly takes time. So the AI capability that we use, which is like rapid alert triage, essentially, that is a workflow that runs against these, it frames itself and puts itself in the mind of an analyst, where an analyst starts to look at an alert like our Oscar framework, right? Which I promise, Ben, I'm not going to explain that whole thing right now. But you have two paths for everything you look at. It's what is the potentially non-threat story or legitimate story, and what's the potential threat story? And you're going to have a creep score that's skewing one way or the other based on what you're reviewing. It essentially explains, takes in that full context, like I said, against that user, that specific customer environment, what we've seen in other customer environments, explains both of those potential theories, and then has a confidence interval where at the top end of it, it's going to say, I know this is bad for specifically these reasons. And to your question about what does it not do, is it doesn't today make decisions. We don't trust it to do that. But it serves up all of that information to an analyst to have that human in the loop dynamic to more quickly arrive at the same conclusion, is how we're using it, or deprioritize something that we are fairly certain is benign. Maybe they'll check a couple additional things. We've also had to condition the analyst to be extremely comfortable disagreeing with the AI. It is so agreeable to us, but however, it's not a two-way street. We need to be very comfortable not agreeing with it. But it's been a really cool capability that we're actively working on right now. And that's just one of the many things on the list.
When I heard that, and again, Nick, I could be wrong here and correct me if I am, but when I heard Ray sort of explain that and sort of take all of the evidence and serve it up and say, we're relatively confident that this is the answer, but it might not be the answer, and then just leaning into the analyst to make the decision. That seems like something that would fall in quadrant 2, which is a high impact, low trust sort of action. And that's exactly the kind of thing that we're looking to achieve inside of that quadrant, where AI is essentially doing the work of rounding up the evidence and then leaning into the analyst to make that decision. Is that correct? Am I saying that correctly?
Yeah. And I think it would have been easy. Identity, like Ray can call me on this, but identity and endpoint are like two of our big sources of finding evil. So I think it would be easy to sit down and say, I don't want to go near that, because if it goes wrong, that's like one of our best ways to find evil inside of someone's environment. I think instead of approaching it from that lens, we said, well, here's an opportunity to turbocharge one of our best ways of finding evil in customer environments and make our SOC much more effective and build this like world-class decision support system. But it's going to have to meet some pretty high bars. And some of those bars it hasn't met. Like, we haven't let it go and run rampant and start turning things on and off and closing things. But a lot of the bars it had to meet to even be able to get the time of day and talk to one of Ray's analysts, it took a while for it to get there. And now it has. So I think it's a great example of, it's a high impact thing, both in positive and negative. that I think some people might have stayed away from. But if you put the right guardrails around it and put some good metrics around it, it's a great opportunity for a good little success story there.
Yeah, very cool. A question, Ray, and this is sort of a practical question for somebody who identifies a place, maybe to deploy AI inside of their SOC. Before any AI, maybe let's look at Expel specifically. Before any AI deployment goes live in our SOC, like what is the process of kind of rolling that out within the SOC? Obviously, as an MDR, any updates to our platform that we do is so that we can move faster on behalf of our customers. And so within SOC operations, whenever the product team or somebody like that builds out a new sort of AI capability, like what does that look like in terms of like getting the SOC analysts up to speed on what that does, and I guess what does it have to clear to get to that point?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's something that we, from the jump when these conversations started, felt really strongly about, is that it needs to still. There's tons of potential and it's exciting, but it needs to adhere to like our product and engineering principles and enablement and thorough testing and all that type of with representative real data, instead of just throwing experimental things in front of very busy people can go sideways pretty fast. So that's why we're thankful for, Nick and the other folks on the product team for adapting our time-tested frameworks for here's how we, conceptualize something and write the right documentation and, requirements, really exciting stuff, but so important. A bunch of to the left work before anything actually is live. There's a lot of intention and prioritization of what's going to have the best impact, and also being unafraid of, if initial testing isn't showing the results that we would expect, like let's table that and let's try the next thing on the list, and being free to experiment. And that's where innovation lives. So there's a lot of control gates before something gets to in front of analysts. And at that point, my expectation is it's going to be about 80% complete. And we're probably going to still have some good dialogue, robust feedback, and fine tuning and iteration that we're going to have to do, but it should be pretty darn close.
Yeah.
Before we did it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's one of the advantages of working with, again, this isn't meant to be a sales pitch. We're talking about how to deploy AI in your SOC, but at the same time, like, I think it's helpful. It's when you're working with somebody like Expel, like we've done the hard work of, seeing what works and what doesn't work, and it's like this is something potentially for later this summer in one of our upcoming sessions when we kind of work with some of the people who are developing out these capabilities. It's like, what goes into finding the AI or automation that provides value? Like, how do you find that? Like, what's the process? Like, we are able to kind of fail in order to find the thing that works. And so anyways, I think that's a value of working with us. Nick, from your perspective, on the product side, where does that process start with you guys? Like, are you just whiteboarding, are you looking at points of friction in the SOC and then figuring out like, ways that you can, where does the idea start, I guess, is kind of what I'm getting at.
A little all of the above, specifically for like more my side of being involved with the platform. Like, it's things that happen even before it makes it to Ray in the SOC. So any of those tasks that we know right now are either highly manual or we know we could embed the like context that we need into a model to help make those decisions. We start looking at those, but we approach them in like a very similar way that Ray's has. Like, we have agents that are doing things far before they reach like the visible surface of Workbench, but there's still at some critical juncture that we define. And I think that's the question we're always trying to figure out, like, where's the critical juncture that we want to put a human there to just gut check and make sure? And are there metrics we can have that would make us feel comfortable for that human to walk away or not be there on like a per record basis? Maybe they only evaluate it once a week, what that thing did, instead of basically walking alongside of it. So that's how we approach it. It's very similar. I think it's why it works so well here, is because we all just have a similar way of looking at it, and no one's trying to go like full automation upstream of the SOC, and the SOC's definitely not trying to go full automation downstream of us. So as long as you and your team are all on the same page, I think then you're at least all measuring it the same way and get some good outcomes out of it.
Ray, for you, whenever a new AI capability or a new automation comes online, like, has anything ever like, and you don't have to give specifics here, but like, tell me about like the feedback loop that you have with your SOC team. Like, are they providing you with feedback, maybe even like negative feedback, like this isn't really working for us, or this isn't solving the problem that it went out to solve? Like, is that sort of an ongoing conversation that you're having with the analysts? Like, what does that look like? And then are you taking that back to the product team as well?
Yes, that is a great question. So that's something that we lean into pretty hard, is the most direct with the least frills feedback you're going to get is from shift analysts. They're going to tell you exactly what they think, and it's a beautiful thing. But obviously we don't want to bog them down. And here, let's have like a 2-hour feedback session. It needs to be really easy for them to do, and then collect those small pieces of feedback in volume, have somebody who gathers them together and has those conversations, say like one of our SOC managers as the central POC. So we do absolutely make the feedback loops really accessible to the SOC. Some of these things, like AI is so good at so many things, but one of the things it's also really good at is taking something that should be 500 words, making it 5,000 words. Like, I'm making up numbers. It can be overly verbose, where
100%.
An analyst is like, I want to be able to read this in 20 seconds. Can we make it like 30% of the words that it is now? So minor changes, as I said earlier, like delivering 80% solutions, not letting perfection be the enemy of progress, but then being ready to have those conversations and iterate rapidly directly after. And whenever it is fresh and you get that initial fresh perspective, people aren't accustomed to it yet, is the best time to get that feedback. So that's what we try to capitalize on. Like, those first few days are really the time, get it buttoned up, and then move on to the next thing.
I can imagine, in automation, that works well can provide a lot of value to a SOC analyst that's moving really quickly to high volume, but something that doesn't provide the benefit that they were expecting can really create a drag, right? Obviously want to keep tabs on that. So we've talked here, and I got a question for you, Nick. So we've talked here a little bit about the grid. So again, here, folks, we're talking about the trust versus impact framework. You can check it out at expel.com/trust and hear all about it. It's just a mental model for plotting your SOC workflows and trying to figure out where AI fits in those. We've talked about quadrant 2, which is where AI does the work of going out and gathering up evidence and then serves that up to a human who ultimately decides we're going to go this way or go this way. Quadrant 1 is low trust, low impact, which is basically, this is stuff where you feel comfortable deploying automation, rolling through that stuff. It's like, we trust that the AI is going to get this correct, and the impact is going to be relatively low if it gets it wrong. And so, like, we're going to fully deploy AI and automation into these tasks. Quadrant 3, on the other hand, is high trust, high impact. So this is something that requires a high degree of trust that... Help me out here, Nick. Like, in explain quadrant 3, because this is the quadrant where there are the tasks that are like, humans need to be driving these because these are critical tasks. Like, maybe explain that quadrant, and then maybe give some examples of what might live there.
It's that stuff that your team agrees is way too risky, that if it goes wrong, that's like lots of PagerDuty phones going off, or critical systems going down, or like you have to disclose something or things like that. And that the team, maybe the process itself is really bespoke. Like, it isn't a lot of the things that are in the opposite side of the quadrant. Like, a good example of something that's on the opposite side for me is like when I need to do research about an integration we're going to build, and I need to pull back API documents and things like that. That's a thing AI can handle really well. I can tell it, like, only look at vendor authored things, bring back everything so that I can look at all my research and start to build out requirements. On the other end, where you don't have that level of like really granular things that you can give it and give it really clear instructions. Maybe if you start making a flow chart, there's a lot of like stems going in a lot of different directions. You're going to find yourself in that quadrant pretty fast. So then it's a matter of like, can I remove some of those stems and make it a little bit less complex? But when I talk to customers about it, it's a pretty big range. Like, some people have things like writing detections in there because they're just very, very shy of like putting the thing that triggers this whole process in the hands of AI. There are people, I think a more common one I hear is like remediation, handing over the ability to like take a system offline if you need to AI scares a lot of people because it might not be compromised or malicious or anything like that. It might just have like a little hallucinate moment and then take down a server because it just didn't look at the allow list or the deny list. But really, I just tell people like, look at it, take the word AI out of it and take it as if you hired like a new hire on your team. There are certain tasks that like the person you just hired is not like when Ray hires a new analyst, they don't get to do the big scary incident on day 3. There are certain things Ray has to see before that analyst gets to do those things. And when they do get to do them, I would assume, Ray, you're watching certain things to make sure they're doing them to like the way Expel wants them to do. And then you give them feedback afterwards. It's like the exact same thing, just instead of talking to a human, you're going to be evaluating an agent to do it.
I like that framing a lot, Nick, of like taking AI out of it and just asking yourself that question of like a new employee or a new analyst or something like that. Like, does that match your experience, Ray?
It does. It does. I love a good analogy. I love a bad analogy too, but that one just makes sense to me. It's absolutely true. And it's something that you got to temper your expectations to be realistic. And, again, I'm going to say it again, like anchoring it on the outcomes, but also having realistic expectations.
There you go.
Of how you seek to achieve said outcome. So,
yeah, for
I'm
sure.
on the same page.
We're almost 90% through of the nerdy 30 here, and so let's start to come in for a landing. Let me ask you this first, Nick. Again, just coming in for a landing here. For a SOC leader watching who doesn't have a framework like this, like, or hasn't even really been thinking about it in these terms, or maybe has been thinking about where. I have a feeling that there are a lot of SOC leaders who may be looking at this or thinking through this who are just overwhelmed with the amount of AI chatter out there. Like, where do they start on Monday morning? What is one thing each of you wishes that more security leaders understood about this topic and maybe AI deployment in the SOC?
I think you have to get like the core team together and have an honest conversation. I think you're going to find out that your team is doing a lot more things than you think they're doing, and like bending over backwards to make processes work that maybe you thought were a lot cleaner or automated than they are. And this only works if you have like a really honest conversation with each other about like, how bespoke is this thing that we ask an analyst to do? Could it be handed off to a machine if we gave it the right instructions and things like that? And then in terms of like the one thing, definitely have the honest conversation. And then I think like, I don't know how we get a third axis in there, but I think the third axis is you then have to start, once you've mapped it all out, thinking about like the autonomy of those decisions. So if you own the LLM and all that, that's great. Maybe your team doesn't own it. That's still important. You have to like take a ticket and get in line with your data science team or something like that. If you don't have the ability to rapidly do what Ray was saying and like iterate on things, and you lose that autonomy of the LLM or whatever it is to influence it and embed like the smarts that your analysts or team have into it, you'll pretty quickly, I think, run out of control with it. And I think like all the amazing things that I see like that come out of the SOC happen because the team can innovate. But if you get to a point where everything's tied to an LLM that you don't have the ability to influence, like the innovation train is going to stop because people are just going to say like, well, I don't have the ability to do that. And I think Satya Nadella talked about that at like the World Economic Forum this year, that like autonomy is the next question. Like transparency is the baseline. Then you have trust. And then like, but do you have the ability to change what this thing is going to do? Or are you just renting someone else's knowledge kind of thing?
Ray, what about you? What should SOC leaders, where do they start when it comes to this kind of stuff?
I think especially if you're at the beginning of the journey, I think it's advice I would give probably when we talked about metrics, however long ago that was. I think it's similar where it's kind of
episode 2. Yeah.
Episode 2, crawl, walk, run, where if it's just a starting point, start small, do some experimentation. I think it overlaps a lot with what Nick was saying is you have to be intentional and having like a really rationalized plan instead of just arbitrarily going out and trying to slap an AI bumper sticker on something. Have some intention, have some prioritization, have organizational buy-in and alignment. But then like don't be afraid to experiment. Also don't be set in your ways and be afraid to change your mind. And if something doesn't work out how you thought it would, then make a new plan and pivot from there. Be adaptable and flexible.
That's good.
That's what I would say.
That's good. I like that. All right. To that point, about, figuring out once you've kind of decided these are the things that we want to deploy AI and automation into, trying to decide or figure out, how we go about doing that. We are currently working on a piece. I'll go ahead and tease it. Currently working on a piece internally that is almost sort of a sequel to Trust versus Impact. That's all about, now that you have decided where you want to deploy AI into these different areas, like what sorts of AI or automation belong there. And so it's going to be interesting. So keep an eye on our socials and on our website and all that for that coming out later this summer. Again, people, we are talking about the Trust versus Impact framework. You can find it at expel.com/trust. If you go to that link, you will actually see this. This is the white paper. So you can go here. If you want to use that cool interactive tool that I showed you earlier, you can see the little link to it over here on the left. But this just walks you all the way through this matrix that we've been talking about today. So you should go check that out. Again, expel.com/trust. Let me, I don't see any questions, which is fine. So I'm going to break my rule and I'm going to come up with a question myself. And here's the question. It's for you, Nick. You have been in a couple of conversations at this point about people asking about this framework. Again, I think people have found a lot of value in it, which is awesome. What's some of the constructive feedback that you've been hearing, and maybe some different sort of aspects that may be worth looking into, sort of maybe V2 of this framework? Is there anything specific where you've been like, oh, that's a good point, we should think about that?
I think helping people come up with some of those metrics, like it's all well and good to like get some dots on a graph, but like also helping people come up with the metrics that move those dots around the graph, or like be able to read out a bit more is a common one. And I think will help people get there. That's the main one that people say, like, this is great, but there is a little bit of like, I don't want to put this up on the screen to my boss or whatever. And then they go, okay, well, what would it take for that dot to move there? And they go like, okay. And sharing how we, have rated like a human against an AI to say like, when is it ready to be given to the SOC and things like that. So hopefully we can get that out to people so that they can use those in their day, or see if there's anything that they would add to it.
All right. Ray, Nick, that was great. Appreciate you guys. Nick, thank you for this super helpful mental model that we have that we can use to figure out where AI fits in our SOC. Ray, appreciate you always coming on and sharing your wisdom with us. Third time's a charm, man. I was catching good vibes this time. I thought that it was a great session, with you, and so we'll have to pull you on for a fourth one. All right, we're gonna wrap this up, and we'll pick it up next time. All right, thanks everybody. We'll talk soon.
Nerdy 30.